Sic Parvis Magna. Greatness from small beginnings is the motto used by the main character of the Uncharted franchise. I chose to start with this quote because I feel like it perfectly describes the entire series. Today, Uncharted 4: A Thief's End turns 4 years old, a game that I've played numerous times, a story that ends my favorite game series with a perfect conclusion. I want to discuss the impact of this game and how much it means to me, not only as one entry, but as the story that concludes a 9-year journey centered around the character of Nathan Drake. A series filled with great characters, interesting stories, and memorable scores. But in order to truly express all of that, I have to start at the beginning, where greatness first started. Uncharted Drake's Fortune was the first part of this franchise, released back in 2007 and created by PlayStation developer Naughty Dog, previously known for creating the Crash Bandicoot and Jak and Daxter franchises. Uncharted was a brand new third-person action-adventure platformer IP, centered around treasure hunter Nathan Drake, who was trying to prove his theory that Sir Francis Drake, legendary explorer, faked his own death. Upon release, it was met with positive reviews, most praising its groundbreaking graphics. The game started off as all others in the franchise do, with a quote from the famous explorer that Nate would be following in the footsteps of. Right off the bat, we discover Nate's theory is correct, as he opens the coffin of Sir Francis that was stuck at the bottom of the ocean. Found inside is nothing but a journal that talks about the lost golden city of El Dorado. What follows is a fun, fast-paced adventure filled with lush jungle environments, explosive action sequences, and memorable side characters, in the likes of the smart and sophisticated TV journalist Elena Fisher.
That's relieving me at the dock.
And the wisecracking, womanizing, and cigar-smoking Victor Goddamn Sullivan.
I don't really care about any of that stuff, and cut to the chase, would you?
Man only interested in the climax. You must be a real hit with the ladies.
Never had any complaints.
Okay, then.
Along the way, you'll face off against numerous villains, such as the narcissistic and quick-tempered Eddie Raja, who always speaks about himself in the third person, to the cunning crime lord Gabriel Roman, as well as Atoke Navarro, the backstabbing leader of a mercenary group who eventually becomes the main antagonist after betraying Roman. The game's gameplay was pretty standard for its time. It offered serviceable gunplay and somewhat clunky movement, but where it really stood out as a game was with its setting. While it may not be anywhere near as large in scale as the sequels, the Amazonian island that you spend the entirety of the game on still has many memorable locations, ranging from the green and lush booby-trapped jungles, to an old giant stone fortress, and even an abandoned Nazi U-boat. While it may be outdated in many aspects, unraveling the game's story and discovering all of the twists along the way, such as the Lost City only being a cursed statue that turns people into mutated descendants of El Dorado, make the game the fun adventure that it is, and it will always be remembered by me as the game that kicked off the franchise and introduced us to its lovable characters. 2 years later, Naughty Dog released the second game in the franchise, Uncharted 2: Among Thieves. Unlike the first, Among Thieves was met with overwhelmingly positive reviews, receiving multiple Game of the Year awards, many calling it the best PS3 exclusive so far. The game's story was much larger in scale, and it would be the first in the series to offer an online multiplayer experience that featured many different modes, giving players more content to have fun with after finishing the game's campaign. The game was no longer set on only one island, and had instead been turned into a globe-trotting adventure, taking you from the swamps and war-torn cities of Borneo to the violent, snow-covered mountains of the Himalayas. The story centered around Nathan Drake, who was in search of Marco Polo's lost fleet, which had supposedly come across an ancient civilization known as Shambhala, where a giant blue sapphire stone worth hundreds of million lies. Along the way, Nate is betrayed multiple times by fellow treasure hunters, hence the game's title. Companions such as Elena Fisher and Sully will rejoin you, Sully being given little screen time, but fresh faces are also introduced, as you are joined by a new romantic interest named Chloe Fraser, who is described by the game's writer as the darker side of Nate and the bad girl to Elena's very innocent girl-next-door qualities. In other words, she's portrayed as being very sexy and much more untrustworthy, although her personality changes quite a bit by the final act. But at the end of the day, she's still Chloe.
But admit it, you're gonna miss this ass.
And let's not forget the best character in gaming history, Jeff.
When you put it that way, it does sound pretty stupid.
Yeah, thanks for the input, Jeff.
Villains this time around are far more memorable as well. There's the sarcastic and witty Harry Flynn, who comes across as a scummier, less intelligent version of Nate, and the tyrannical, ruthless, and fearless war criminal Zoran Lazarevic, a much more serious and dangerous threat compared to any of the others in the series. Gameplay in the second was heavily improved over the first as well, including far better gun control and player movement, tougher and larger puzzles, as well as better designed climbing and platforming that gave a much better sense of direction. Where the first still had fun and enjoyable action scenes, the second game would introduce us to the Uncharted franchise's well-known set pieces. The game, opening up with a train dangling over the Himalayas that you must climb before you plummet to your demise, a helicopter that shoots down a building you're in, as well as a tank battle in a small populated village, and many more. As for the supernatural threat, Among Thieves featured Yeti-like guardians who protected the sacred lost city. Eventually you discover that these beasts are actually transformed humans wearing outfits to scare off villagers. These guardians ate sap from the Tree of Life, the previously mentioned stone being crystallized amber, not sapphire, introducing one of the game's story's twists. By the end of Among Thieves, it is clear that Nate is in love with Elena, and the game further develops their relationship moving forwards. Overall, it is a far superior game to the first, that continues to explore more exciting adventures with the great Nathan Drake. It was also the game that introduced me to this series. In November 2011, Naughty Dog released Uncharted 3, Drake's Deception, once again met with highly positive reviews. Although its story, which focuses on the Atlantis of the Sands, aka Ubar, and how Sir Francis Drake lied about his discovery to hide the civilization's dark curse, had been criticized for its lack of focus and somewhat disjointed narrative that will have you traveling between multiple locations in short amount of times, as well as introducing side characters who will only be featured briefly. Continuing with the story, however, Nate and his allies find T.E. Lawrence's notes and a map which disclosed Sir Francis Drake's voyage to Arabia. Along the way, they face off against a secret order that dates back centuries, currently led by the ruthless and manipulative Catherine Marlowe, the main antagonist of the game, who seeks the Lost City's curse as a weapon to exploit enemies' fears.
Known you'd be behind this. Oh, careful now. Wouldn't want you to melt.
She is joined by her right-hand man, Talbot, who shares her same sadistic and cruel personality, as well as a love for creating hallucinogenic poisons and magic cards, which honestly have no explanation. I'm still confused by them to this day. My biggest problem with the villains is mainly how underused they are, as well as their bland and forgettable personalities. I do like how the game focuses on Nate and Sully's relationship, however. Going back to Nate's early childhood when he first met Sully, companion-wise, everybody from the previous two games, Sully, Elena, Chloe, the latter given very little screen time, return, along with newcomer Charlie Cutter, who has a big sense of humor, is loyal, and also very claustrophobic. I like Cutter, but I feel like he's far less memorable than any other of Nate's companions. As for gameplay, Uncharted 3 feels mostly the same as the second. The gunplay is perhaps slightly weaker, as some of the weapons feel clunkier, although it does have my favorite puzzles in the series. They seem more important and far less thrown in than they do in the previous titles. The climbing is the same, and overall the only new additions to gameplay is the game's more in-depth hand-to-hand combat, which you're introduced to in the first level, that feels somewhat choppy but certainly more detailed than previous entries. There's also a new mechanic that allows you to toss grenades back at enemies. As for the supernatural threat, the true mystery of what happened to the people of Ubar thousands of years ago becomes apparent. When King Solomon captured the spirit of Djinn in a brass vessel, he cast it into the depths of the city, where it fell into the water and began to taint it with a powerful hallucinogenic agent, this being what the antagonists are after. This hallucinogenic water, which you drink without knowing its curse, causes you to see Marlowe's men as fiery-headed skeleton demons that teleport. Overall, I enjoyed the game's story. I think it had potential to be superior to the seconds. As a matter of fact, I honestly find it more intriguing, but the messiness of the narrative and the way it's told prevent it from being better. I do love the game's set pieces, which are the best in the series, ranging from the burning chateau, the sinking cruise ship, and the massive cargo plane which crashes. The game is filled with exciting, high-octane adventure moments, more Nate and Sully, which is always welcomed by me, as well as further fleshing out Nate and Elena, where we discovered they were married between 2 and 3. I enjoy the more personal aspects of the game's story, exploring Nate's past with Sully, and how his actual surname, which isn't revealed until the 4th game, is not Drake. That being said, it's a weaker campaign than 2, although that all depends on what you find to be the most important part. The one aspect that pushes this game further than the second for me, however, is with its multiplayer. I poured hours and hours into this online experience back in the PS3 days. It was the first game I ever managed to reach max rank on. I loved all of the maps, which had great environmental threats, and I had a ton of fun in the variety of game modes it offered, as well as screwing around in private lobbies with friends, where we played something we like to call Michael Myers, where everyone had 30% health, meaning one punch would kill you, and one player was selected as Michael Myers who would hunt down the others, who couldn't fight back until it was only 1v1. And let's not forget the lab, which were easily the best maps in any Naughty Dog game. The game introduced me to a lot of great online friends who I'd played with for years, until one day I would check my friends list, and they wouldn't have been on for over 2 years. In 2019, Naughty Dog announced that they would be ending online support for all of their PS3 games, and thus, Uncharted 3's multiplayer remains, only in my heart. On a less sad note, we fast forward to 2016, where Naughty Dog released the 4th and final Nathan Drake focus game in the series, Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. Originally, the game went through production problems, and Amy Hennig, the creator and writer of the previous 3 titles, left the company. She would be replaced by Neil Druckmann, creator of The Last of Us, who took over the role as the creative director, with Bruce Straley continuing to be the game director. Uncharted 4 would be following a retired fortune hunter version of Nathan Drake, now working for a marine salvage company, who has finally settled down and once again married Elena Fisher. He has vowed to be done with the treasure hunting life, but he still shows sign of missing the adventure. These first few levels exploring Nate's current life are sometimes criticized by newcomers to the series for being slower and boring. I personally love these levels, because I feel like they were made for the fans. If you played the previous 3 titles, then you'll definitely recognize some of the artifacts and treasures lying around that would be callbacks to those entries. There was even little music cues that would appear when you picked them up.
Yee. One of the stranger things
Eventually, Nate discovers that his previously unmentioned to us brother, Sam, is alive, after it was believed that he was killed during a Panamanian prison escape you played in a prior level in the game, set in the late 90s.
What?
Yeah, so unless you want to end up in a Panamanian jail, we should probably handle this ourselves.
What's worse?
You obviously haven't been in a Panamanian jail.
Sam informs Nate that he's in trouble, and that the man who broke him out of prison, Hector Alcazar, who is a big drug lord, wants Sam to locate a lost pirate treasure him and Nate looked for in the past. If Sam doesn't deliver, Alcazar will track Sam down and torture and kill him. The relationship between the two brothers is the driving force of the game. It is without a doubt the most personal feeling of the stories, diving into Nate's young childhood, where we find out his mother had theories on Francis Drake having offsprings, as well as the truth behind Henry Avery's lost pirate treasure. We find out Nate's last name is in fact Morgan, and that him and his brother changed their names after breaking into the house of their mother's friend, who had kept her belongings, and who dies immediately after she finds out they're the children of Cassandra Morgan before she can call off the police. The game's story about the famous pirate Henry Avery, who joined forces with 11 other major pirates and created a pirate safe haven on a Madagascar island where they would settle down in a colony known as New Devon, is easily my favorite story out of all the games. It feels grounded but still large scale, and the fact that it's a personal story for the characters makes it all the more powerful. I love the character of Sam, who comes across as equally sarcastic but shares a bit more of Nate's bad side. Sully is pushed to the side in this game, but every moment you spend with him is as fun as it should be, with all the goddams and cigar smoking you could hope for. Elena is the best she's ever been as a character. Now that she's married to Nate, it feels like there's more between the two of them. And the game overall feels like it carries more consequences, especially when Nate lies to Elena about what he's doing. The performances given by everyone are fantastic. At this point, it feels like they have really become the characters, and it also features my favorite villain in the series with Rafe Adler, a tiny man with a large ego and a temper that can go from 0 to 100 in a matter of seconds. He wants to prove himself as someone actually capable of being worth as much as he is, and not just the guy that got rich off of his parents. He will be joined by Nadine Ross, a strong and determined owner of a military for hire known as Shoreline. The gameplay and overall presentation is heavily evolved from the previous entries. The gunplay is massively improved from the first games, never feeling clunky. Puzzles are a bit too easy and can be completed in quick time. New additions such as rock slides and wall picks make for more in-depth climbing, an aspect that is featured more than it was in the previous titles. The new rope swing mechanic is also incredibly fun for traversal, and when implemented into combat, it can be a ton of fun. Hand-to-hand combat is the best it's been, no longer clunky feeling like it was in the third. Even the locations feel more exciting than ever. This is due in part to the game's incredible graphics, which to this day is still one of the best looking games ever released, with seamless animation that outmatches any games, and character models that are probably the best I've ever seen. But you can also use vehicles in Uncharted 4. Some levels allow you to explore an entire open map in Madagascar by Jeep, which eventually is used for the series' best car chase ever. You can also drive around a boat visiting multiple islands in what is easily the most beautiful level in the series. Similar to The Last of Us, you can also pick up journal notes left behind by people long dead. These help to further develop the game's backstory and provide even more details as to what happened with the pirate island than you will initially discover just from cutscenes and in-game conversations. While the game may not feature as big of set pieces as the previous two, there are still many exciting minor set pieces that will occur, and this overall lack of giant moments is traded in for a much more personal and focused narrative that is easily the series' strongest. By the end of it, I was completely drawn into the game's story. I loved the twists and turns in modern events and in the history of the pirates. Discovering that Sam had been lying all along and that it was Rafe that had broken him out was a great twist. I also thought it was very interesting how Avery and all of the other pirates took all the colonists' treasure and gold, and then later on Thomas too and Avery poisoned all of the other pirates so they could keep the treasure for themselves. While uncovering the madness that overtook Avery, you can also see signs of Nate's misplaced and selfish importance placed on history and treasure hunting appear in Sam. All of these moments within the story cause it to be my favorite game in the Uncharted franchise, and possibly my favorite game of all time. Now let's talk about the game's ending and how I feel that it perfectly sends off the characters. After Rafe is killed and the treasure is lost, Sam explains to Nate that despite discovering what he has been wanting to see his entire life, he still feels empty. He still wants to go back out into the world and discover more. Nate, the character we have grown to love, says he knows exactly how Sam feels, but that his time as a treasure hunter is over. It's time for a normal life, one in which he can finally settle down once and for all with the woman he loves. Nate and Elena head back to their home and Sully proposes a job for Sam, the two of them leaving to take on more adventures. At the end of the day, those are the type of men they are. Elena discovers some gold coins that were left in her pocket by Sam, and with that money, her and Nate buy Jameson Marie, and finally get the permits for the salvage job in Malaysia. The job Nate had lied about going on earlier. We then fast forward over a decade later where we once again get to play Crash Bandicoot. This time we're playing as a young character we have never seen before. A young girl, most likely around 13 to 15 years old. This girl is Cassie Drake, named after Nathan's mother, Cassandra. She pets her dog named Vicky, named after Sully, and then ends up finding the key to a cabinet that contains all the treasures from the previous entries. Nate and Elena walk in and explain to her everything about what happened. The game ending with Nate and Cassie walking off to a boat while Elena watches over them, eventually walking away and placing down a photo of her, Nate, and Sully from the first game back inside Nate's mother's book, next to a photo of Nate and Sam from when they were younger. The score plays over top and the game cuts to black. A perfect ending to a perfect game and a perfect series. That's why Uncharted 4 means so much to me. It ends Nate's story with a fantastic conclusion that's emotional in a happy way. Do I think the series could continue? Yes. I've said it many times before that I don't mind a series I love continuing after having a great conclusion. I just want to see different characters. I don't want the ones we love to return, because that takes away from that great conclusion that they were already given. I don't even really want to see them return in prequels. We've already received a spin-off, Uncharted Lost Legacy, which focuses on Chloe Fraser being joined by Nadine Ross and Sam after the events of 4, and I think the best way to continue this series moving forward is to focus on Sam's character. We already know that he's really just starting out to become a treasure hunter like Nate, and the possibility of him being joined by Sully and Chloe sounds like a ton of fun. But I think Nate's story should be over. He had his 4-game journey. He will always be my favorite gaming character for his hilarious personality, one-liners, and incredible performance by Nolan North. And it will forever be my favorite game series. Sic Parvis Magna. Greatness from small beginnings.